Welcome. This is Lisa McLachlan. I am the Assessment and Reporting Specialist at the Utah State Board of Education, and I am presenting on what data should you review as part of your school trust lands plans. The School Trust Lands Program specifies that each Trust Lands Council should carefully review student assessments and progress to decide which academic areas they want to focus on. The Utah law says that schools will identify an area of most critical academic need, and councils should use funds in data-driven and evidence-based ways to improve educational outcomes, including strategies that are measurable and show academic outcomes. Meaning that school trust lands plans should be focused on student academic performance as measured by student assessments, academic assessments. As a council, you're going to be focused on student achievement data, which is basically assessments that measure students' academic knowledge and skills as outlined by academic standards, such as the Utah core standards. If you visit the webpage provided on this screen, you can see what the Utah core academic standards are, and educators will administer assessments that measure student achievement based on these standards. This data that's generated through these assessments can help educators and policymakers make decisions about instructional and systemic changes aimed at improving student achievement. All of the school trust lands goals should be focused on a specific academic need as measured by the assessment that's measuring those particular standards. An academic assessment gathers evidence of student learning and informs teachers' instructional decisions. Generally, there can be two different types of assessment. A formative assessment, which is an ongoing assessment that allows teachers to monitor students on a day-to-day basis and modify their teaching on what students need to be successful. Sometimes these are called progress monitoring or progress assessments. They could be really short, that are done in the classroom day-to-day or maybe after the end of a week or 2 weeks. Summative assessments are generally a one-time snapshot that lets the teachers, students, and parents know how well the student has completed the learning tasks and activities and met the academic standards. These are generally done at the end of a term or the end of a year and provide a summary of student learning for a specific time. Here are some examples of different types of assessments. For a formative assessment, it may be the student writes 1 to 3 sentences on the main points of a lecture. They may take a short quiz. They draw a concept map or a chart on the main points. Summative assessments could be a midterm examination, a final examination, a standardized assessment, dissertation, final project, portfolio, essay, or a high-stakes performance or recital. All of these are ideas or ways that can gather student achievement data that to look at as part of your school trust lands plans. Student achievement data is generally focused on providing information on two things. One is mastery, how well the student has mastered the particular concepts or learning objectives, and growth, how well that student has performed over time. Mastery provides a snapshot or a location of the student's ability levels at that particular time, and growth often gives us trends or longitudinal data on the direction that the student is heading. As you're looking at data, it's important to keep in mind the purpose of why you're using that data. And generally, we look at data for a couple of reasons. One is to evaluate learning and provide specific feedback to students. We would use data to measure student growth and achievement. Data can also be used to gauge effectiveness of programs and resources. And this is actually where the School Trust Lands Council comes in. As you're making your plans and evaluating those plans, you would want to frequently review student achievement data to know whether those plans are making a difference on student achievement. And then as you're doing so, hopefully that'll inform your practice and drive changes in your school. So what kind of data should we be looking at? Generally speaking, any kind of assessment that measures student achievement and growth according to the Utah standards would be a valid assessment. But it might also be a good idea to look at what assessments the states are using and to see how students are performing on those assessments. Generally, they are standardized assessments that all the students take, and so you can make comparisons between how the students in your school are doing compared to other schools and the state averages. This is just a brief overview of some of the assessments that the state uses for accountability purposes. In kindergarten, we have the KEEP assessment that measures literacy and numeracy in kindergarten. For grades 1 through 3, we have Acadience reading, or it's also formally called DIBELS, measures reading. It's the Early Literacy Initiative, and it is set to measure students' reading ability levels in grades 1 through 3. For grades 3 through 8, we have the RISE assessment, which measures English, language arts, and math in grades 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, and then science starting in grade 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We also assess writing in grades 5 and 8, not 5 through 8, just 5 and 8. The Utah Spire Plus is an assessment that measures English, reading, math, and science in grades 9 and 10. One advantage of the Utah Spire Plus is that it also provides a predicted ACT score and is meant to be an indicator of college and career readiness. And then in 11th grade, the state uses the ACT scores of all the students who take the ACT in 11th grade as a measure of accountability. So these are all assessments that could be used, and data can be reviewed as part of your school trust lines plan. Quickly, we're just going to briefly go over the state accountability system and how data is gathered to inform decisions that are made at the state level about school improvement efforts. Generally, for elementary and middle schools, we have the RISE assessment that measures proficiency and growth. And then for English, people who are learning English, we have the WIDA access assessment, which basically measures how well they are learning English. And that is what is used to measure the English learner progress, which is the 9% and the 6% there. We also are focusing on growth of the lowest 25%, which is part of the pie. So not only are we interested in how well students do from year to year, but also how they do from across years, and that's how growth is measured. For high schools, there's some additional indicators. We have the high school graduation rate, which is usually the 4-year rate of cohorts and how they progress through 9th to 12th grade and then eventually graduate from high school. For 11th graders, 11% is based on their performance on the ACT that they take in 11th grade. There's also what we call the advanced coursework indicators, so how many credits are earned in, say, advanced placement, college prep classes, or CTE classes. And then we also have growth of the lowest 25%. And the idea is to balance out all of these different indicators of accountability, not only with student achievement and growth, but also focusing on some of those hard-hit populations that may need additional support. And all of these could be areas that your School Trust Lands Council could focus on, the data that's gathered in those particular areas. Some of you may have noticed that the statewide achievement data is mostly focused on English language arts, math, and science. And as some of you know, there are lots of other different content areas that are taught in our schools. Here's a couple of resources that talk about the academic standards and requirements for our both elementary, middle school, and high school. It may be surprised to know that fine arts and PE is a required subject in elementary school, and there are lots of different academic areas that have core standards in them. So as we mentioned before, any kind of student achievement data that you use for your School Trust Lands plan needs to be centered on the core standards, and the core standards does include multiple academic areas such as early childhood, fine arts, physical education, library media, social studies, world languages, career and technical education, financial literacy, health education, and adult education, college, and career readiness standards. So as long as you have an assessment that measures those standards and you have identified those areas as your critical academic need, then you can present those as your trust lands goals and just provide evidence that the students have an academic need in that area. So usually presenting some kind of data in those areas, and then that'll work. So there's lots of different assessment areas that can be used, and it's important to be able to include those areas as well. I hope this presentation has been helpful. If you have any additional questions or would like further support with your school on assessment reports and needs, feel free to contact me. I am Lisa McLachlan, the Assessment and Reporting Specialist at USBE, and I wish you the best of luck in your academic planning and monitoring.